When we think of the written word of ancient Egyptians, we probably think of these hieroglyphs, those pictograms etched onto stone and painted on the pyramids. But those were exclusively for royals and other prominent people. Everyone else spoke a different language known as Demotic. This was their script. The highly cursive symbols are all consonants. There are no vowels. This one here represents the modern-day English letter W, while that is an M. Demotic was used for roughly 1,000 years from around 650 BC. It was also spoken by Cleopatra, the last pharaoh of ancient Egypt. Demotic is one of the 3 scripts inscribed on the Rosetta Stone, along with Greek and hieroglyphs. This crucial piece of history allowed scholars to decipher the royal language. Now, using archival documents and private letters, the University of Chicago has produced a 2,000-page Demotic dictionary. They've translated contracts showing that husbands would promise a set amount of food and clothing money to their wives. Other documents show women had the right to own land and divorce their husbands. The work helps reconstruct ancient Egypt's culture, social life, and language. So, with this dictionary, anybody will be able to talk like an Egyptian.
Janet Johnson is a professor of Egyptology at the University of Chicago. She's been compiling the new Demotic dictionary for nearly 40 years, and she joins us now live from Chicago. Professor Johnson, we know what the language looks like, kind of. What does it sound like? Does it sound anything similar or different to the languages that are still around today?
Well, yes, the range of sounds in the language was similar to most ancient and modern languages. The vocalization we don't know because they didn't write the vowels. There was nothing unusual about the sound as far as we know.
Why spend 40 years putting together this dictionary? How useful can it be in today's world?
It's a dictionary aimed at scholars, at people who are trying to publish the original documents that tell us about the life of Egyptians from a 1,000-year period of their history. It's not the kind of dictionary that the average man on the street would consult, but it's the kind of dictionary that scholars working on studies of the ancient Mediterranean world in the first millennium BC and the first millennium AD would be consulting to find out about their texts. We have not only the meanings of words and the way they're written, their orthography, but we have samples of how the words are used. So that a student who's learning the language or a scholar who has a text and is trying to figure out a missing or broken place will have some examples of things that he can think of as parallels that might help him in his reading and restoration.
And beyond telling us about the way people in ancient Egypt spoke, what does it tell us, if anything, about the way people lived in ancient Egypt?
Well, the texts are written by and for average people, not the average peasant who was working in the fields, but the average bureaucrat and the people who were officials in offices. And these were people who were literate, and they wrote down their literature, they wrote down their religious texts, they wrote down mathematical texts and astronomical texts, but they also wrote down everyday things. Their taxes, their legal texts, personal letters, all these kinds of things which provide some insight into individuals and what they thought and what they did and what happened to them in their lives.
How widely spoken was this language, Demotic, and just how quickly or gradually did it begin to disappear?
It would have been spoken by all of the population of Egypt which was of Egyptian background. In the period that it was used, there were a growing number of people of foreign extraction, first Persians and Semitic-speaking people during the Persian Empire, and then many, many Greeks and Macedonians who would be speaking Greek in the Hellenistic period after Alexander the Great. But the whole Egyptian population would have been speaking this language, and those who were literate would have been writing this language. And there was a crossover. There were some Greeks who learned some Egyptian, Demotic, and there were many Egyptians who learned Greek as well.
Janet Johnson, Professor of Egyptology at the University of Chicago, many thanks for joining us.